Engrossed Senate Bill 705, reducing coal severance tax to 3% over 2 years. Third reading of the bill.
Questions on passage of the bill? Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill would reduce the coal severance tax from 5 to 4% on July 1st of 2017 and from 4 to 3% on July 1st of 18. The bill was amended yesterday to give the same provision on severance tax for natural gas, and oil would be treated in a like fashion.
Questions on passage of the bill? Is there discussion? Senator from Boone.
Mr. President, I come from a county that's probably the epicenter of the coal decline in Appalachia. And the senator from Logan and I come from a district that is the epicenter. And the impact that we've seen on the coal industry and the economy of the southwest coal fields of West Virginia is dramatic and tragic. Our county commission has lost millions of dollars in revenues. Our school system, which values education highly. In fact, Boone County is second only to Putnam County in what we pay our teachers. Boone County has an honors academy that teaches STEM. That's been on the chopping block. We're combining schools, consolidating schools, closing schools. Teachers are being laid off. Coal miners, families have either moved or trying to move and don't have a job. They go from a $70,000, $80,000 job to just whatever they get on for being laid off. The clinic that I work at, one of the clinics that I work at, is closed. It'll be closing April 1st. If it doesn't affect everybody, if it doesn't just affect coal miners, of course, the banks, the car dealers, it's just tragic. And the research that we've done and talked about, that if we would lower this 2% or 1%, that you might get 0.47 increase in production, 0.47 increase in production, but the coal severance tax collections would go down by 27%. The county that we represent are already wiped out. Boone County is closing its transfer stations that they've operated for waste management. When the amendment, and again, we know it's multifactorial. It comes out of the EPA reg because of transmission reasons and because the price is so low. So gas has been a huge competitor of coal, and we all know that. We're already repurposing all these coal-fired power plants into gas-fired power plants. So the amendment yesterday, I think, basically says that 0.4% increase in production won't happen because we're giving gas the same 2%, 1 and then 2% reduction. So it's not going to help coal. And the fact that this is going to go on a year from now or in 2018, the rug's already been pulled out from under us. I put to you that this is too little, too late, and I also say to you that it's fiscally irresponsible. I'll tell you that I feel in this body that I'm the number 2 coal supporter in this body, and that's out of deference to the number 1 coal senator, in my opinion. That's Senator from Logan. There's no one done any more to try to protect the industry, grow the industry, keep the industry from declining than the senator from Logan. I'd like to think I'm a close second. I think the governor, who's a former senator from the 7th District, also is a pro-coal governor. who basically said yesterday in the paper, we can't absorb a $100 million tax cut into the general revenue budget. We just can't do it. And even studies earlier on, you know, when we were looking as a select member of the Committee on Tax Reform, we all heard that coal's, you know, the severance taxes are not all that good, but they basically have helped fund us. And all these other states that are around us that don't have any coal severance tax, they're getting hit just as hard as we are. Folks, we're competing with out west, the Wyoming Basin. We're competing with the cutback in China's economy, which is, you know, where we've sent a lot of our coal. So I'll quote our Mr. Deskins that says, worst news for policymakers hoping to aid the coal industry is that dropping the severance tax altogether would likely have a limited effect on increasing in-state producers' competitiveness. That was from a year ago. So as much as I would love to buffer this tragic loss of coal jobs, the way I weigh it, you know, on a scale is that it wouldn't help, and it would further cut the economies of the district that I represent. That's already been cut to the point where it's to the bone and they're bleeding. So I urge rejection of Senate Bill 705.
Further discussion? Senator from Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fiscally irresponsible. I think it would be fiscally irresponsible if we gave the coal industry an indication today that their contributions to the state of West Virginia, everything that we've heaped on the backs of the coal industry for years, it wasn't worth making a change today to give them the opportunity to plan for tomorrow, a year and a half down the road. That's physically irresponsible. We've had a tendency to change the ground rules sitting here in the session at a moment's notice, making the industries, regardless of whether it's coal, regardless of whether it's gas, change because we've made adaptations to their, whether it be their severance tax or other use taxes, while we're sitting here. And so within 90 days to 6 months, they've got to make a change. This is physically responsible, as far as I'm concerned. It gives coal the opportunity to plan. More importantly, within their long-range planning, which they have to go back to the banks in order to look at how they're going to finance other investments, other operations. It gives them the opportunity to look at that long-range plan and understand what the impact for severance taxes are going to be in the long-range basis. As I thought about this particular issue, in the counties where the mining industry has already been impacted, quite honestly, we're already, I mean, if we look at the severance taxes coming off of those counties where coal virtually doesn't exist anymore, the severance tax is zero. Why? Because we're not harvesting the coal out of the ground. Boone County's lost 82 mines over the last 6 years. Braxton County's lost a couple. Logan County's lost 26. My county's lost 15. In August of this year, Nicholas County will lose the last remaining operating coal mine within the county. This is a good way for us to tell the coal industry, which is struggling right now to survive. We believe in you, and we're willing to help. Over the course of the last 8, 10, 15 years, every time we've had a problem, we've gone to the coal industry and said, will you help us? They took on the workers' comp debt, and they did it willingly. When we've needed additional revenues within the state of West Virginia, we've asked them to increase their severance taxes. They've done it willingly. Why? Because they believe in West Virginia. It's time for us to now show that we believe in coal. Mr. President, I urge adoption of the bill.
Senator from Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in opposition, and none of these remarks that I'm about to make are directed at any one person in the body. But let me just say that it's almost like I'm hearing arguments in a divorce case from my days as a divorce commissioner in Cabell County. Coal's been so good to us. It's done a lot for us. We love coal. And let's give coal an alimony award here in our separation. Yes, we do have a legal separation based on multiple factors: worldwide economy, regulations from Washington, D.C., prices of the commodities. But we're not in a position where we can give anybody an award just because they've been a faithful partner to us. And I'll also add this, again, in all due respect to all my colleagues in this room. If this is election year, I would hope we don't vote on this bill based on potential donors in the energy sector that might appreciate our vote on this bill. Thank you.
Further discussion, Senior Senator from the 4th. Is there other discussion before the Senior Senator from the 4th closes? Senator from Logan.
Mr. President, my senior senator from Boone, in my opinion, gave about as good a talk to explain our situation as you could ask for. But when you hear comments, and it's nothing personal, but, a lot of you people just think you know the economics of coal. You don't know what it's like to sit there as president of a county commission waiting on a $400,000 check to do things in your area, and the check is $72,000. You don't know. Back in 1998, I begged people in Logan, Boone, Lincoln, Mingo, Wayne, and surrounding counties to join me in the fight. And boy, do I wish I'd have been wrong. When a permit of acreage extension was turned down and Dowtex shut down, in my area, $29 million in direct payroll, $3 million direct taxation to the county and the school board, 435 jobs, the average age of 36 years of age, gone. I've seen it. I went to every EPA hearing, DEP hearing, OSM, permit, sanctions, qualifications, public hearings in Logan, Charleston, Mingo, Boone. Go look at the record who showed up. Go to D.C. and see which elected official, as a county official and as a state official, went to everything. Ask Mr. Hamilton who flew up there with them to address the EPA on permits. And I listen to all these legislators now telling me that we should vote up or down on a tax problem, and you really don't know what you're voting on. That disturbs me. When you've been there and done that, you know. I worked underground physically 12 years when I was president of the county commission in Logan, the midnight shift as a move boss with 2 men to take care of the power, the belts, the electronic moves and everything for 40 men. I stopped at my sister's house, changed clothes, went to the courthouse before I went home to go to bed. I've lived it. I've been a part of it. But when my colleagues talk about fiscal responsibility, how do you think I feel when you say that? And my county and 2 of my counties now that I represent, for 5 or 6 years in a row, have sent between $160 and $175 million to this state and got 10% of it back for the people, for water, for sewer, for recreation, for education. That didn't stop me from being a coal proponent. because it was the right thing to do. And like I said the other day, if I thought it would create jobs, I would push the green button tomorrow or today or next week. But I'm telling you, we're getting ready to we're sitting here and we know how many multi-millions of dollars our budget has to be backfilled now. And to sit here and make these cuts on a potential vote for two companies I love. I love the oil and gas people too. I'm strictly a person that believes that jobs create ability and economic value. But when you look at the people that their property, they've took part of their property to get a mine site, they've suffered in certain ways, and I accepted that pity and listened to it. But there was always a balance, in my opinion, that we could get to. But I don't want to go back home and tell those 110,000 people I represent, get ready for tough times, because you'll not be able to have that library, that ball field, that little bit of money back to your community, that all these multi-millions and billions of dollars worth of coal. We didn't have this discussion 6 years ago when Australia flooded. We was getting $350 a ton out of met coal. Did you see any bonus checks going to anybody then? And I hate to say that. But if they need our help then, why didn't they give us a little bit more help then? They made it big. I mean big. It's an up and down industry. Always has been, always will be. And I can tell you I'll be there to support that industry. But this is not the issue that takes it and turns it around. I said since I got here, we should be bringing in the CEO of Alpha, Arch, Blackhawk, or whoever, and all these other industry people. And I told y'all, the economic impact on coal is not the little bit of coal severance tax that goes back to the public. It's the permit problems. It is the time to get a permit. $2.5 million on a mine permit now used to be $40,000. How did it get to that point? When people make money, they let things go. They don't pay any attention until it gets out of hand. Trust me, it's out of hand. It needs every bit of mental institutions we can put together as legislators, but not on the backs of these poor people in West Virginia that are waiting on a little bit of taxation to do things for their kids. So please trust me on this one when you vote your conscience. I know the Coal Association may not like my speech today. They've always supported me. I've always been there for them. But I can tell you one thing as a legislator, when the right thing comes up, I will do the right thing. And with that, I sure hope you do. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's a tough act to follow when you hear those heartfelt remarks out of my friend, the senator from Logan, the senator from Boone, that come from a different region of the state that also produces a lot of coal. And I'm reminded, and I remind the folks that I represent an area, Marshall County, it's the leading coal producing county in the state. But I also know that sending us down here that we have fiscal responsibilities to do some things to try to balance a budget. You know, we just gave the industry, oil and gas industry, $113, $115 million in tax breaks when we deferred the workers' compensation premiums that they pay, the surcharge that we pay. Over $100 million, I know that's going to kick in almost immediately, but they're saying it's not enough. And what we did, and this bill would do, would add an additional 1% to oil and gas of $40 million, $80 million, $100 million a year for the next 2 years, without the promise, without any type of measurable requirement that there's any additional jobs created, investment made, or communities suffering that have any other means to offset the loss. We're adding another $100 million plus hole in our budget without any hope or without any realistic projection that it'll do one darn thing, to hire one other person. That's the reason we offered the amendment yesterday to tie some of these cuts to employment. We've always done that in the past. That's been the responsible way to do things. You know, it reminds me a little bit, when I first came down here in 1997, the leading employer in the state was Weirton Steel, senator from Brooke. 16,000 employees. Second leading employer in the state, I think, was Weirton Steel at the time with 11,000 employees. That was 1997. And shortly after that, we started having steel dumping and problems with dumping of steel, and we had rallies, and we mobilized, and we had Stand Up for Steel rallies, and we marched on Washington, and we gave long political speeches, and we were going to stave that steel industry in my backyard. And I think we even gave them a $20 million bailout, if I'm not mistaken, to try to help Weirton Wheeling Steel get through some really tough times. And we did that on hope, not on facts. And at the end of the day, that didn't help. Weirton Steel doesn't exist anymore, and there's, what, about 600 people up there working at the remnant, 600? And Wheeling Steel doesn't exist. If we're going to make kind of commitments of reducing severance tax, it's going to hurt our communities. I appreciate what coal has done for our state and its history. But I'll tell you, I don't know that by cutting additional tax without any real knowledge, projections, or measurable pegs to tie those cuts to hiring and payments and jobs and investment in our community, it's going to do anything. You know, coal's been the king in our state for 100 years. But we are the poorest state in the union in many respects, and some of the counties, unfortunately now, are some of the poorest counties in the poorest state. And that's sad. I'm not sure that cutting more taxes at this time is going to change anything other than hurt our budget, hurt our people, and hurt our ability to invest particularly in education. 80 teachers being laid off in Boone County. Teachers being laid off in Nicholas County. Cutbacks, I know, in all over our state. Particularly cuts for the first time in my lifetime as a legislator to public education. We've been cutting funding to higher education, year after year, to the point we're down to 20–25% cuts over the last probably 5 or 6 years. We need to invest in people, Mr. President. We will be giving the oil and gas industry and coal industry over $200 million worth of tax cuts if we pass this bill, in addition to the workers' comp cuts. And how are we going to offset that? We've got a couple pieces of legislation that have gone out of this chamber for the tobacco tax. It's going to tax people that smoke. People that smoke. Never seen a corporation light one up yet. We're going to raise taxes on purchases of cars and on gas and other things on the road bill that went out of here earlier, 555. That's going to be paid by people that live in our communities. So I just find it hard-pressed for me to turn around and say our solution to the state's fiscal woes are to grant more tax cuts to business and industry and put more tax burden on the people that we represent. It's fiscally responsible at this time, and I urge the rejection of the bill.
Further discussion. Senior Senator for the 4th to close.
Well, there's a few things I'd like to say. About 2 or 3 months ago, I, as a finance chairman, was invited to a meeting of finance chairmen around the country. And there was an interesting panel discussion about revenue and stability of revenue. And quite frankly, I've said this privately, and now I'm going to, I've done a lot of things here that are probably going to drive a lot of people away, but I'm going to say what I'm going to say. We made a mistake when we looked at a fluctuating revenue source, which you've referred to. Coal is up and coal is down. To replace it with what this panel said, one of the most stable revenue sources around the states is the food tax. But we got rid of it. And I would suggest that in the future, and I don't know how long I will be here, but I would suggest a couple things, Mr. President, in response to what's been said about these counties that have lost revenue. First of all, I'll just give a little history. I supported the senators from that area years ago, and it didn't really help my county that much, but in an amendment to the severance tax, as I recall, to give a higher percentage of the severance tax to the counties. And I remember that. I remember voting yes on that and being a part of it. You know, and even though it didn't locally, because I don't think we have much coal mining in Putnam, I would suggest, Mr. President, that we, in the future, as this bill goes forward, obviously it's amendable and fixable, that we would consider changing the percentage calculation to a higher number for the counties that are being dramatically affected by the loss of severance tax already. I have no problem with doing that and losing that revenue to the state, because I think somebody in the future, whoever's sitting downstairs, is going to have to face the fact that we're going to have to systemically go back to more stable revenue sources. It happened a few years ago, back during the Caperton era, when we ended up in trouble. So I would say to the gentleman, I hear what you're saying. If this bill were not, if this was the final destination of this bill, I might have to vote against it myself based on what you've said. But it's not. There's more to go. And we may have to maybe back out of it, some of the things that were done yesterday. But I do believe this. I do believe that the representatives from the coal industry, when they say, and we just heard the statistics of the number of coal mines that are closed, that there are some mines, I don't know how many, that are looking for a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. And they see this as that light that may keep them committed to keeping their minds open and not shuttering them down and just leaving and going out of business. So I believe much that's been said by several of my fellow senators on the other side of the aisle is true. You've lost already much severance because of the conditions of the market. I would not be opposed to making you whole with severance. There'll still be some around as this bill goes forward. But I do believe that it does help these companies project. Now, if we would assume that what has been said in committee, that there are several jobs that can be created or not lost, however you want to look at it, by this enactment, then people are affected. Not just corporations, but coal miners and people that work there. So a part of the original bill, with it being loaded down with the additional break, that I would suggest maybe should come out of this bill as it goes forward and focus on the coal industry, because I believe that I can, as a person who observes this from a distance, there are different market factors facing the pricing of nat gas in the future and oil as the pressure is facing the coal industry. And that's why we focused on it at first. So again, this is not the final destination. If this bill dies today, it dies today, but I see some potential in working with the finance chairman of the House of Delegates and those folks over there of trying to address, Mr. President, some of the concerns of the counties, the concerns of the coal industry, and then we will have to take seriously in the future more stable revenue sources that are not so up and down, and we've dramatically now experienced what it means to do a 6-year plan that had been done by previous governors and this one on a revenue source that's way down. That's why we have to take serious and be statesmen sometime and not politicians and decide to fund whatever level of budget we want with something that is stable. So I think we can get a win-win out of this and make a commitment that I would work, if this bill would make it to the other side of the building, to address some of the concerns that have been addressed here by the senators, and to also try to address the concern that have been brought to us by the industry about their survival, the survival of many companies. So that, Mr. President, with those comments and, I guess, promises of commitment of how to work this bill, I would urge its passage.
Question before the Senate, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. The clerk prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine to ascertain the results on this question. 19 yeas, 15 nays, 0 absent not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk has a title amendment.
Senator Hall moved to amend the title of the bill.
Questions on the adoption of the title amendment? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Declare the title amendment adopted.